On December 4th, 1941, a camera-equipped Spitfire raced towards the coast of occupied France, capturing an image of a mysterious device that alarmed Allied planners. This photograph initiated a series of events leading to one of the Second World War's most daring missions, where 120 elite paratroopers descended on the site. In this video, we explore Operation Biting, also known as the Bruneval Raid. By the end of 1941, the Allies faced a bleak situation. Germany dominated Europe, with France, Belgium, and the Netherlands under its control. The British were on the defensive, and the German army was advancing through Soviet Russia. Despite these challenges, the British sought every opportunity to strike back. At the heart of this effort were RAF raids, crucial for gaining any advantage. The photograph taken by Flight Lieutenant Tony Hill was pivotal, leading British intelligence, including Dr. R.V. Jones, to recognize the advanced German radar capabilities. It was decided that a pinch rate should be conducted as soon as possible to capture and return vital components to the UK for testing of its performance into combined operations. Created as early as 1940 as a special service force, it consisted of highly trained specialists, including the newly formed Commandos and British Airborne Forces. Their role was to conduct small-scale targeted strikes against vital targets, just like the radar system of Brunel. The execution was far more complex. Let's understand why. Situated on top of a series of sheer cliffs near the small village of Brownsville to the north of the port town of Layoff, the site itself was very difficult to access. Located around a now-demolished villa which once sat here, there were a number of structures and emplacements in the vicinity, as well as a nearby building complex known as Le Crespy de l'Art, which housed a garrison of perhaps as many as 100 German troops. The identified radar was to be found here, and the only viable link to the sea was to be found on a steep valley side in this area, leading to a German defensive position and headquarters building overlooking a small beach at the bottom of the valley. Vital intelligence provided by the French resistance under the legendary Colonel Remy had revealed the area to be heavily defended from seaborne attack. In order to reach the site, a force would need to breach those defenses, climb this steep valley, nullify the now alert defenders of the radar site, capture, dismantle, and carry it back to their landing point, hoping, of course, that the Germans wouldn't destroy it before the Allied raid has even got there. In short, a seaborne assault simply wasn't practical, but there was another way. If the Allies could land behind those defenses and take the enemy by surprise, they might just be able to grab those vital assets, take out the German beach defenses from the rear, and then evacuate by sea. For that to happen, the airborne needed to take the lead, and to Major John Frost, by turning to the vast archives available through Find My Past, we can learn a little more about this remarkable man. Amongst the available records is this, the 1912 baptism of a John Dutton Frost in Pune, India. His father, Frank, is listed at that time as a lieutenant in the British Army, a profession his son was to follow next. In 1930, we find 17-year-old John's Army entrance examination for cadetship at Sandhurst College. Included here is a statement from John's mother confirming his age and place of birth. Young John attended the prestigious Wellington College in the late 1920s before being commissioned into the Army, aged just 28 in 1942. Frost, then a temporary major, had volunteered for the fledgling airborne when it had been created and was ultimately selected to lead a party of 120 men from the almost entirely Scottish Sea Company set in Parachute Battalion in the assault on Brno. His plan looked something like this, flying across the Channel in 12 specially adapted Whitley bombers, commanded by the legendary Wing Commander Picard, and each carrying 10 men and their equipment. Frost's force would parachute into this area some 650 yards to the rear of the radar site before assembling here to begin their assault. Well, once the mission had been approved, Dr. Harvey Jones had created a shopping list of key components of the radar array that would be vital to understanding its potential. Amongst other things, he needed the main antenna and various smaller items. But also he wanted the instrument labels and serial number of each component to understand just how many sets the Germans had produced in order to gather that material. Flight Sergeant Charles Cox, an RAF radar technician who would oversee the gathering of equipment, which would be loaded into specially built folding trolleys and carried to the extraction point. Cox himself, who had been rushed through jump training just days before the raid, was key to the success of the mission. By the 27th of February 1942, all was in place, and 120 highly trained men filed into their Whitley bombers for the perilous journey to occupied France, taking off shortly after 11 p.m. from RRAF Thruxton. The 12 aircraft headed for their target. Amongst them was Sergeant MacLeod Forsyth, who recalled the moment. Two of those aircraft, one of which was flown by Picard himself, actually missed their target and dropped their sticks several miles away in this area. For the rest, the drop went well. And within just a few minutes, Frost Force was on the ground. And crucially, there was no gunfire. Reshuffling is force. On hearing that two of his parties were missing, Bassoon learned that all his available radios were malfunctioning, and runners had to be used to maintain communications. Nevertheless, his force set off a little behind schedule, with Frost himself leading Holiday's section in the assault on the villa, crossing this very ground from the rendezvous. They approached the village from the rear, finding it open and almost completely deserted. Storming into the position, the single German sentry encounter was quickly dispatched in the village, captured at the same time just a few yards away. The radar pit team, including Sergeant Cox, reached their target, finding a single German radio operator who was swiftly captured. Lieutenant Vernon, armed with a camera to photograph the remaining key components, took this single photograph, the flash of which brought the very first enemy gunfire down onto the attackers. Clearly confused, but now alerted the enemy. Fire would increase throughout the remainder of the raid. A little further down the coast, the 20 men of the Nelson Beach Party and the 20 Miss dropped men who were racing as fast as they could to catch up closed in on their objective. The force at the villa and radar pit, their jobs complete, planted demolition charges on the structures around the villa, and under cover of the explosions began the arduous journey, carrying heavy equipment and several wounded men. CSM Strawn was badly wounded with a bullet to the abdomen, and Privates Scott and McIntyre were killed. Confused as to the strength of the enemy ahead, and with the villa now reoccupied by the defenders and the volume of fire increasing all the time, the attackers were in a perilous position. Then the Nelson Party struck. Attacking from the rear of the German seaward defenses, the Beach Party assaulted several German machine gun positions and in a short but bloody fight captured them, and Stella Marie. This pre-war casino, which had since been taken over as the local German headquarters. Within minutes, the vital extraction point had been secured and Frost's men could continue their advance to the beach. By 2:35, the first landing craft had touched shore and the raiders, desperate to reach the safety of their awaiting flotilla, rushed to the craft, which would take them and their precious cargo home. Over the next few minutes, 112 raiders, 2 prisoners, and almost all of Jones's requested components slipped away from the shore into the night under the cover of gunboat fire. MacLeod Forsyth was amongst the last to leave, and he recalled a close call in those final moments. The brunt of our raid was over. All told, the operation had lasted just 140 minutes, but the impact was huge. In the coming days and weeks, those captured components, along with the German radar operator taken in the raid, revealed a wealth of information about the new Würzburg radar, which had the potential to identify aircraft approaching land up to 25 miles away, but at a much higher level of accuracy than previously achieved. That capture also provided a huge step forward in Allied signal jamming technology, which would be essential in the D-Day landings along the same coast in 1944. The raid had been a great success, due in large measure to the element of surprise. The subsequent response was also unexpectedly up on stages to the Allies. Hitler had ordered that henceforth all radar stations were to be heavily defended, including by belts of barbed wire around the entire site. This small but significant change made it much easier for Allied photo reconnaissance to identify previously unseen installations all along the Atlantic coast, which had plagued RAF Bomber Command. Operation Biting the Brunt of Our Raid had in all truth been a remarkable success, but that success did not come without cost. 2 men, Private Scotts and McIntyre, lost their lives that night and are today buried in nearby Liev Cemetery, and a further 8 men were wounded. 6 more were left behind in the darkness, all of whom would later be captured. Many more brood of outrages would go on to see further action in the war, often not living to see its end. But for all who took part in that vital mission in 1942, it was a night they would never forget. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more, subscribe StoriesUntwist, press the like button, and share it with your friends. That's all this time, and we'll see you again soon.